Hi there, I'm Jesse Funk, violinist and composer. If you haven't been on this channel before, mostly I spend the time posting stuff that I've written, but I wanted to come on and talk a little bit today about a piece I wrote recently, or at least within the last year, called Christmas is Here, which I wrote for live symphony orchestra. And there's a few things that I learned kind of along the way. So if you're trying to write for live players, or you, like me, have had the opportunity to write for full orchestra for the first time, hopefully some of these kind of tips and thoughts will influence your workflow and make it a little bit easier for you to put together your piece for the orchestra that you're writing for. We'll just dive right into it. So my first tip basically is write for the players that you have. And this sounds obvious on the one hand, but I think it's hard to keep in mind when maybe you have a particular sound or a particular kind of gesture in mind where you're like, oh, I really want to do this. Maybe you want that like Hans Zimmer sound, but you don't have eight trombones to play. Like you have to keep in mind who your personnel are, um, both in terms of arrangement, because you can't really get that like huge, like overly big brass sound that like Zimmer likes to do if you don't have the players. But also, like, do you know what the skill level of your players are? For this piece I wrote, Christmas is Here, I was fortunate enough that this is actually an ensemble I play in. I've been with this ensemble close to 10 years now. So I've sat with these players and I have a pretty intimate understanding of how well they play at various kinds of passages. So I tried to tailor my music to the players. Now, if you don't play in the ensemble that you're writing for, it gets a little bit more difficult. But if you're able to, listen to pieces they've played and kind of judge the technical ability of your players, it's just going to make life so much simpler if you don't try to throw them something crazy. So that's my first tip. Second one, and this kind of goes together, is just like listen to your players. So I knew going in when I did some rewrites on my piece as we played it, but I knew going into it there was a particular section I gave to the horns that I knew ahead of time I was going to be hearing about it. I was like, let's see if they could do it. Just because and again, I had this particular notion in my head. I want it to sound this way. It sounds this way with samples. Obviously, live players are different. But I was like, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, let's have them give it a go. And we played through the section. And the conductor goes, "Oh, any thoughts, comments, questions, whatever." And I'm very open to feedback. And just immediately, hands shooting up in the horn section. I said, I know exactly what you're going to ask about. So it basically, I wrote it in the top end of the register, and it's just really challenging to hit some of these notes over and over again. So I ended up doing some rewrites in that section. But the big thing is basically like take your ego down, drop your humility, or bring your humility up, drop your ego down, and listen to your players. So if they're like, I mean, this is a tough section, or like this doesn't really work, or maybe this would work really well, whatever. Um, take that as feedback, make your rewrites there. And then also, if you get positive praise, like you did something well, take that as well. So in my piece, I really feature a trumpet player, and I know our trumpet player, so I kind of knew what I was getting him into. And he told me, I can't remember if it was before or after the concert, but so, one of those times at the concert, um, just gave me the compliment that the trumpet part that I wrote really sits idiomatically well on the instrument, which is, I feel like high praise. So toot my own horn a little bit, but just, he told me that I did a good job, in short, that I wrote something that wasn't technically not really making sense on the instrument. So that's where, when you've done that, take your praise. Know that you've done your job well. And then when you haven't, take your lumps too, learn your lesson, and then move forward. So this is my third kind of thought and idea thing that I learned while I was writing this piece. And that's what I want to tell you is be clear, not clever. So in my piece, this Christmas is Here piece, and if you haven't heard it, subscribe to the channel. I've uploaded a rendering I did of the piece. So the piece moves between 4/4 and 6/8 a few different times. And sometimes that's a bit of a challenge trying to kind of square these two different feelings because the 6/8 is basically in two, with that triple beat feel, and then 4/4 is our standard, 1, 2, 3, 4 time. And so what I did originally with a transition from 6/8 back to 4/4 was I transitioned the actual music to 4/4, but the notes themselves in the first three beats of the first 4/4 bar still act as if they're in 6/8. So effectively, it sounds like you're still in 6/8, even though it's notationally written as 4/4. And then it goes to 4/4 next bar, and then you're back into a regular 4/4 section. But I was being too clever for my own good because there's also a retard in this section. And what I should have done instead was actually just make that another 6/8 bar, done a 4/4 bar that was retard 1, 2, 3, 4, and then like a 1/4 prep beat bar before moving back into the next section. Because what I ended up doing was having two 4/4 bars, and then it goes into a regular section, but you have to end up slowing the whole ensemble down on four and then starting them again on fourth, a new odd tempo. It's just I was too clever for my own good. So that's one of those cases of just like if your players are having trouble with it, if you go like, is this the most clear way to present this idea? Try it a few different ways, or if you have the opportunity to talk to the conductor, the players, whoever, what makes sense here. If you're not sure, and that's something that just I'll take forward. I learned, and will take that as I kind of work on new music moving forward as I write new pieces for the ensemble. So number four is just kind of makes sense, but like be ready for edits. You kind of know if this is your first go at it, most likely you're going to have to edit something. In my case, from conception to sheets on stands, I think I spent 40 or 45 hours. It's about a 5 minute piece. And then once I made some edits, the horns with their shooting their hands up. I made some edits to that. But then the conductor kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop. Not too bad, but he said, "Well, you've got two trombones, but I actually have a third trombone player and I'd like to put him to use." So then I had to add a third trombone to the entire piece, which then necessitated rearranging a number of chord structures throughout the entire piece. It was like another 5 hours of work to add that extra player and rearrange everybody else in ways that made sense. So you just kind of know the job. That's what it is. You give it to them. They say, "Well, this isn't right," or I'd really love to do this," or maybe this would sound nice. Be ready for edits. And then the last thing, and maybe this is just me in particular, but just as you're writing your music, uh, make notes, make more notes, make lots of notes. I make them in the score myself. I like to, like when I'm going through and doing chord structures, and in this particular piece, I use a lot of secondary dominants and like kind of modulations to different keys. And because of the nature of all the transposing instruments, and because I'm a violin player, which is, as you know, not a transposing instrument, it is so much quicker for me to come back and look at my notes and go, okay, this was my chord progression, instead of having to look at all the staves and then like, you look at all the transposing instruments and then figure out what I'm looking at. It's a skill I'm still working on, and a good skill to have, but just when you have notes and you made yourself notes, this is my chord progression, this is what I'm doing to do here, this is my dynamic gesture, whatever it is that you're trying to notate, what you're trying to accomplish in the music, that will make it easier when you come back and the players ask you for things or you're doing edits to speed your process up. So you're not, dug way down again and being bogged down trying to figure out like, what the heck did I make? So that's kind of my five things for writing for live players, my suggestions, the things that I've learned after writing this 5 minute piece. So again, if you want to hear more of my music or stick around for more musical thoughts from me in the future, subscribe to the channel. Again, the piece is called Christmas is Here, and it's also on the channel. So thanks for hanging around.